Hey there, it's me, Clara. Welcome back to my new channel. In my last video, I said I would talk about being an LGBT scientist, and I would talk a little bit about my story. So that's what I'm gonna do because I think it's my story. So yeah, why not? Yeah. So I was always good at science and maths at school, and so it seemed pretty obvious that I'd go into something along those lines. Although actually, I never finished my A levels because I started to be aware of my gender dysphoria. I got really unhappy and depressed, and so basically, I dropped out of school. I flunked. I was far happier going out and drinking and partying and working jobs, menial jobs to pay for me to go out drinking and partying. And so that's what I did. I kept on starting my A levels. I think I started them 3 times, something like that. But I never finished. I just kind of kept on dropping out because yeah. But after a while, I thought, okay, no, I can't keep on doing these kind of menial jobs for next to no money and being ordered around by people that aren't as good as me. So I went to university. I got on a foundation course for engineering. It was mechanical and electrical engineering, and then from that I got onto a degree, electronic and electrical engineering. I wanted to do robotics, but all the courses in Manchester stopped, like literally the year. Maybe they just didn't want me. Anyway, so yeah, so all the courses shut down, so I did electrical engineering. While I was doing that, I also did a work placement for a year for a company that made vacuum deposition equipment, which was kind of cool. They made roll-to-roll vacuum deposition equipment for food packaging, basically. So you've got a bag of crisps, and it's got metal on the inside. That's to stop, that's to keep your crisps fresh. It's to stop air, oxygen, water getting through and ruining your crisps and giving you a mouldy bag when you open them up. So yeah, actually quite a lot of science goes into your crisps. So that's what they did, and so I started doing that. I started out on the shop floor in the design room as an electrical designer, but that was I'm not really very good at sitting down all day. So I got onto the shop floor, did tests, which basically means you turn everything on, see what blows up, and then try and work out why it's all blown up, and then you replace the parts. I would say that you check it and then you turn it on and nothing blows up, but I'm being honest. And then I got involved in the actual process. So this was the material engineering side of it, and that was really interesting. And I was able to go out to Japan with a machine for a few months, 3-4 months, to work on it, and it was really great. But at this point, I went back to university to finish my degree because this was a gap year. And despite my gender dysphoria kicking in pretty bad, and I was struggling, I was very depressed. I wasn't a happy person at all. But I managed to get through, and I actually came out with a first, which is remarkable. Maybe, I don't know. I'm sure it would have been a lot easier if I wasn't also severely depressed at the same time. But there you go. So I went back to this company afterwards because they offered me a job, which was cool. I got involved in some really cool projects, but then got offered a PhD. This was a material engineering thing, so this is kind of moving away from engineering and more into the sort of science field. And that was cool. It was a really good group, really nice, open group. My professor Pete was great, and the guy that ran the lab, Glenn, amazing, and the people that I worked with, amazing. I also met a girlfriend while I was there. After a few years, ended up kind of splitting up with my girlfriend because I realised that she wanted a boyfriend, and I realised that I had no intention of being a boy. That wasn't who I was. I couldn't quite admit it to myself at the time, but there we go. But I carried on doing my PhD, and it was a struggle. It was hard because I was struggling. I wasn't great, and yet at the same time, I was being invited to work in different groups, and I kept on finding all these interesting things. I mean, I was doing pretty well. I was just struggling doing it. Makes me wonder what I could have done if I wasn't. Yeah, so then after I finished that, I got invited to a visiting research post in Finland, which was a different type of thin film material science this time. So I'd been working on high power impulse transputering previously, which is one method of making thin films, and this was atomic layer deposition. So I was doing that for a few months. I was in Finland. I actually got offered a postdoctoral position at EMPA in Dubendorf, which is near Zurich in Switzerland. So I went out there and I continued doing a high power impulse magnetron sputtering. Actually, I was doing thin films, but different types of layers this time. These were hardness, whereas previously they'd been transparent conductive oxides. While I was doing that, I went to a whole bunch of conferences. I'd go and visit different groups and work with different people, and it was really good. I think, I hope I had a pretty good reputation in my field for what I did. I think I did. I definitely moved more into the material science, but I was still kind of an engineering sort of thing. So I count myself as a scientist more than an engineer now, but, it's kind of the crossover for me. Material science is a hybrid science, and that kind of suits me. It's a bit of everything. It's great. Yeah. So then I carried on with my postdocs. But now I was single. I've been single for X amount of time, and I was working, and I was, on my own, and I stopped going out. I started getting depressed. My gender dysphoria really came through. At one point, I had a conversation with someone that I actually, I was able to be open to, and, I said, I don't want to transition. I'm quite happy being who I am. I'm quite happy cross-dressing. And it was only when I said that out loud that I realised it was rubbish, and it wasn't true, and that was a lie. So they managed to put me in touch with someone that I could go and speak to, and I started the whole process of transitioning while I was out in Switzerland, which is great because in the UK you wait forever. I didn't have to do that. So yeah, I started transitioning. I couldn't be open at work because there was a bit of a sexist, homophobic vibe going on, so I'm pretty sure it would have been transphobic too had I, been open about what I was. So I kept it to myself, although I did have friends there that I talked to. I had some of the most amazing support, and I needed that as I started my transition. I also started telling people. I started telling my family and friends back home in the UK. And so when this position came to an end, I'd been there like nearly 4 years. At that point, I was done. I went full time as a woman. But I kind of at this point assumed that my scientific career was over, because in 13 years I'd met one out LGBT person in 13 years in science and engineering. I assumed that if I was out as trans, I'd just be kind of booted out. I'd have no career. I won't get a job. And that had an impact during my postdoc. I wasn't publishing, I wasn't writing papers, because I thought my career was dead. I thought it was done. So why bother, right? So I was struggling, and I didn't write, and that wasn't good for my academic career. So I went back to the UK, and I was transitioned. I was out, but I needed a job. I got to pay for stuff like records. So I applied for a job at the University of Oxford. I'd worked with them during my PhD, and it was a nice group. And it was more of a technical role. It was managing a lab rather than outright science. And I thought, well, maybe I could get away with that, right? So I applied. I actually applied under my old name, and then sort of rang them back when they offered me an interview and said, "Oh, by the way, I've legally changed my name. Like, I just put the wrong name down." And they were like, "Oh, okay, whatever, yeah, sure." And they invited me for an interview, and I did the interview, and they asked me about what I could do, my job, my qualifications, where my expertise was, how I'd handle certain things. Didn't talk about my transition at all. Didn't care. It was a non-issue. They wanted to know about my job, which is how it should be. It's perfect, but I wasn't expecting that, and I was really grateful actually. So as soon as they offered me a job, I was like, "Yeah, sure, I'll come." And working, I was able to be myself at work for the first time. It was amazing. So I moved down to Oxford, and people just got on with it. People don't always get it, but people get on with it. And I realised that people don't always get it, so I started doing talks, explaining the 101s of being LGBT or trans specifically, and I go around and I often different departments. And as I was doing more talking, I started meeting more LGBT people, but people that were in the closet, especially in STEM subjects, that were in the closet because they didn't feel they could be open, or couldn't be out. This was staff, this was students. So I started doing more talks. I'm like, "Hey, I am a scientist, I am an engineer, and I am trans, I am LGBT, and it's fine, And the feedback was really good. People were pretty surprised, I think, and as I'd met one out LGBT person in all that time, and when I thought about it, it's like, oh god, that's why I was worried about transitioning. So I started making a point of sort of saying, "Hey, I'm a scientist and I'm trans, I'm a scientist and I'm LGBT." I started doing more talks, I started getting involved in things, and so yeah, I started going into schools and I started talking about being a trans scientist in schools as well, which is something that I really enjoy doing. It's really good. And so, yeah, it's really good. So I work in the Department of Materials at Oxford University now, in the Centre for Applied Superconductivity. I occasionally do experiments. I do most of my science when I've got like a school group coming around, and I show them around the lab, and then I throw some stuff in liquid nitrogen and play with some magnets and just kind of do pretty low key. So I actually, you know, and to be honest, I do more talking about being a scientist than I do actually doing science. But that's kind of important right now, because we need to see that if you're in STEM subjects, you can be yourself, you can be LGBT, because we know there's been studies that have shown that people aren't out in STEM subjects and they're not happy, they're not bringing themselves to work, they're not achieving what they can, they're not doing the best that they can. And that's what I did, right? Show people that, you know, you can be yourself. I'm not saying that all subjects are great, I'm not saying all departments, all universities are great, but there are good ones. And actually I've spoken to all the groups that I used to work with, they all know now, and they're all great. They're all, you know, they're really cool. They accept me for who I am, which again, you know, I spent all these years worrying that they were going to outcast me, and actually they're like, oh cool, yeah, it's nice to see you happy. which is really sweet, if I'm honest. So yeah, so now, like I say, I want to make sure that people know you can be an LGBT STEM researcher. And there's, just to let you know, there's like this, in the UK, there's this LGBT seminar. So I went to it in January and it was amazing. It's all different science and all STEM subjects, all these different people of all different levels giving talks. So there's undergrads, you know, there's second year undergrads and also end of career academics giving talks and stuff. And everyone's LGBT. It's amazing. I walked in, I wasn't the only LGBT person, I wasn't the only trans person even. Yeah, but it was great, you know, and I didn't stand out unless I was sort of jumping up and down and going, hey, look at me, which I might have done during my talk. Also, people were live tweeting my presentation, and it turns out I say a lot of really stupid, dumb jokes, but you know, it's fun, right? And that was it. It was nice as well, because people were making jokes all the way through the day, and I don't usually get that at conferences, and people were laughing. It was brilliant. So yeah, so I want to say, you know, like, I don't think that being LGBT is a barrier to being in STEM subjects. I don't think that it's really a barrier. It might not be quite as easy, but I think you can be open and be yourself and bring yourself to work. And I think that's fine. I think we're really improving these days, and that's great. So it's really nice to see. If we allow people to be themselves at science, we're going to get the most from them. We're going to get the best science. We can get the best people. It's all well and good saying, oh yeah, we welcome everyone, we're a very diverse group, but if you're actually not a diverse group, then you don't, you know, people don't believe you, they won't come to you. So it's not enough to just say you're diverse, you need to actually be diverse, and people need to see that. And I think we're improving, and more people are feeling that they can be themselves, and we're seeing more role models. When we do, I think science will be all the stronger for it, right? I mean, you know, how can you not be stronger if you've got the best people? You're gonna be. So this is why we shout about it. Yeah, it should be about who does the best science, but actually it's not. You know, there is more to it. We do need to see the diversity. We do need to scream and shout and jump up and down about it. So that's what I'm doing. That's what I'm doing. It's cool, and I'm enjoying myself. So yeah. Anyway, so you can follow me on Twitter, I guess, Clara M. Barker. Put that below. I'll put my blog, which is about my transition, other links below maybe, I don't know. But yeah, and I'll be back soon talking about something, possibly trans politics. So, okay, cool. See you later. Bye.